You know, if you were to ask 10 people what makes the perfect t-shirt, normally you'd probably get 10 different answers. But lately, across the menswear scene, it almost seems like everybody wants the same thing, and that's a heavyweight t-shirt. I think it's fair to say heavyweight t-shirts are really having a moment right now. Maybe it's their texture, maybe it's their story, maybe it's just Jeremy Allen White squeezing into his heavyweight Merz tee in the Bear. Whatever it is, everyone seems to agree that they want some heft in their t-shirt. But a lot has already been said about Merz Schwanen tees or the heaviest t-shirt in the world by Wonderlooper. So if you like both of those and are in the market for a heavyweight tee, I wanted to introduce you to an alternative that I feel like doesn't get quite as much love online despite being on the same playing field. And that is the heavyweight stand wheeler t-shirt from Warehouse & Co. What's up guys? I'm Logan and I'm here to help you buy better stuff using everything that I've learned from a decade in the apparel industry. And today we're talking about a t-shirt from a brand called Warehouse & Co. Now, we are not talking about the 4601 tee that a lot of you might be familiar with. We're talking about what's called the stand wheeler t-shirt. Now, this is technically from the Warehouse & Co sub-brand Dubbleworks, but for the sake of this video, we're gonna group it all together. If you're unfamiliar with Warehouse & Co, this is a brand that's part of the legendary Osaka 5 group, which are the 5 brands that are often credited with the Japanese denim boom of the 80s. Warehouse was the final member of this group that kicked off in 1995, and it was actually founded by 2 guys who came from another member of the Osaka 5, Ivisu. Now, apparently the founders wanted to do something a little different than just gold jeans. They wanted to dedicate their brand to full, faithful, vintage reproductions. And 30 years later, they're doing just that. Now, as you can imagine, with a background like that, Warehouse makes some pretty killer jeans, but we'll save that for another episode. Today, we're talking about tees. And Warehouse makes some killer t-shirts, but my favorite of theirs is the stand wheeler tee. So like a lot of popular heavyweight t-shirts on the market right now, the fabric for these tees comes from Wakayama, Japan, where it's made on an old circular knitting machine called a stand wheeler. And in the true vintage spirit of the brand, the machine itself was originally discarded, but later refurbished by Warehouse in order to make these t-shirts. And if you've never seen a circular knit machine before, basically think of the fabric being spun on a big tube, as opposed to coming off the machine flat like most fabrics would. It's how old school t-shirts were made. It yields a totally different kind of texture than most t-shirts would be. And also the final product doesn't have any seams on the sides. And a lot of that has to do with how time intensive the process is. Now get this, according to Warehouse, these stand wheeler machines can only produce enough material to make 15 t-shirts a day, which frankly for a category like a t-shirt that is often so volume driven, 15 t-shirts a day is crazy and likely very hard to make economic sense for the brand. But like I said, I mean, the brand's been around 30 years. Clearly, they've figured out how to make it work, and we get to enjoy the low and slow results. Anyway, once the fabric is finished, they're sewn up into a real classic shape. There's no logos, there's no branding, super minimalist. And of course, they use a vintage style single needle stitch for the sleeves and the hem. And then the collar uses a double needle stitch, which thankfully doesn't sit too high on the neck. Well, one thing that's really great about these tees is that they actually come in larger sizes. They go all the way up to double XL, which is gonna measure about 25 inches across in the chest or so. For reference, I'm 6'3", a little over 200 pounds. I can do either an extra large or a 2XL in these, so even if you have a little bit of size on me, you can probably make these work. So why else do I like these? Like I said, I mean, this is a heavyweight t-shirt by all accounts. Now, it's not gonna be nearly as heavy as, say, the Wonderlooper double heavyweight t-shirt, right? It's gonna be much closer to something like the Merz Schwanen 215 tee. And personally, that's a good thing, and I think is actually a good thing for probably most guys in most situations. You're gonna get all of the great things about a heavyweight t-shirt, right? You're gonna get the structure, you're gonna get the texture, you're gonna get the quality, you're gonna get the fact that It retains its shape even after you wash it multiple times. But what you're not gonna get is that feeling of being constricted or like you're wearing a, I don't know, suit of armor or something like some, uber heavyweight t-shirts give. And so I just think it's a much more versatile way, especially year round. I mean, some of the heavyweight tees that are on the market, a little ridiculous, especially for like, summertime, right? When you want to be wearing a t-shirt on its own. And I think that the Stan Wheeler tee hits the mark on all accounts. Also, I touched on this briefly a little bit earlier, but one thing that I really like about the Stan Wheeler tee as opposed to Warehouse's 4601 tee is the collar. See, on the 4601 tee, the collar sits super, super high and tight, which personally I don't really vibe with. I prefer something that's a little bit more low profile. And the Stan Wheeler tee, I think, is kind of right in the nice sweet spot. Fit on these is super classic. In my opinion, it looks better, a little bit oversized as opposed to more tailored. And some of that has to do with the fact that the sleeves on this are a little bit longer than most t-shirts in the same kind of category. Some of that is gonna come up after you wash it. You do lose a little bit of length in both the body and the sleeves. In my opinion, not nearly as much as what you would lose in a Merz tee. So keep that in mind when you size. I think it's always better to go a little bit looser than tighter on these. Or if you want to avoid the whole shrinkage thing altogether, you can just get one of the pigment tied tees, which I think look really great as well. All that being said, dude, I think these are some pretty damn good tees at what I think is a pretty reasonable price. We've got them right now at about 85 bucks over at Blue Owl, which a little bit cheaper than Merz, a lot cheaper than Wonder Looper. So if you are in the market for a heavyweight tee, I would recommend you at least take a look at these. Everybody that I know who has picked these up absolutely loves them. I know a few guys that have had these for years. Like I said, you can wash them multiple times. They're gonna hold up just as good as anything else on the market. But let me know what you think about these tees, dude. I mean, if you've worn them before, drop your honest feedback in the comments below. Or better yet, I mean, if you know of any t-shirts that you feel like don't get quite as much love compared to some of the bigger names out there, drop those in the comments too. Anyway, that is it for me today. If it was your first time on this channel, I would encourage you to subscribe so that you can stick around for everything that's coming in the future. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you very much. Peace.